So today we're going to be talking about primates. They're just like us. And I'm really excited about this topic today because I actually used to work with primates a lot. So we're going to go through an introduction for our new friends. We're going to talk about origins. We're going to talk about behavior. We're going to talk about our activities, our homework, and then we're going to go through some resources. So as an introduction for our new friends, my name is Megan, and that's what I look like when I'm dressed up for work. I am Aiden and Lizzie's mom, and I work at scientist.com. So I either work with your moms and dads at scientist.com, or your moms or dads are maybe one of my clients or a friend or my brother maybe for my nephew Ali. And I have a background in science, and I love to share and teach. So I'm sharing some cool facts with you guys today. And because of my background in science, I actually spent a lot of time working with primates.
Can you hear? Yeah. Do you need it louder?
No.
No? Good.
Actually, there we go. So I actually got to spend a lot of time working with primates, and I'm excited to tell you guys about that. So we're chatting today for a couple of reasons. A lot of you guys are out of school, or I think all of you now are out of school. Your moms and dads are still working or trying to get work done, and you still need to learn lots of stuff. So I'm trying to help you out with that. And today we're going to be covering the origins of primates to begin with. So you might have seen something on our last chat where we talked about ornithology. Well, today we're going to be talking kind of about primatology. So that is the branch of zoology, or the study of animals, that deals with primates. And anybody can study primates. You can go to school for it. You can get a PhD in primates. You can get a master's in their behavior or their husbandry. And people can also study them just as a side interest. So this picture is a crab-eating macaque, or a cynomolgus macaque. That is a mom with her little baby. And these are the kinds of primates that I used to work with. So they're actually called non-human primates. And I worked with them in a laboratory setting, and I got to be around the mommies and the babies and stuff all the time, and I really loved it. So I'm going to tell you about that a little bit more in their behavior. But primates are distinguished in a couple different ways. So they have 5 fingers. They're pentadactyly, means 5, and penta means 5, and dactyl means finger. They have a kind of generalized dental pattern that is similar across all of the primates. They have a body plan that's not really specialized in any way. So you know how birds are really specialized for like flight, and other animals are adapted in specific ways. Primates have a body plan that's more unspecialized. So the focus is on kind of their smarts. So they also have fingernails, which are uncommon. A lot of animals might have claws, but there's not really a lot of fingernails out there unless you're looking for primates. And they also have opposable thumbs. So that just means they can wiggle around their thumbs and do stuff with them. So it's not just like lots of fingers. And opposable thumbs are really good for gripping things and picking things up and manipulating objects. So there are other animals that also have opposable thumbs, but they're a good feature to look for in primates. There are some famous primatologists that I want to tell you guys about. The lady on the left is Dian Fossey, and the lady on the right is Dame Jane Goodall. And my father and family actually got to meet Jane Goodall, I think in Tanzania in like the 60s. And these ladies are some of the most famous primatologists in the world. So Dian Fossey unfortunately has passed away, but she extensively studied mountain gorilla groups. And she's a pretty interesting lady. And then the one on the right, as I mentioned, Jane Goodall, she is actually still around. She's a little bit older now, but she's one of the world's leading experts on chimpanzees. And so she's founded a lot of different institutes and programs to protect them, and she's really, really well known. So now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the ancestry of primates. So there's kind of a family tree of primates, just like we talked about family trees in birds and in dinosaurs and things like that. And they all evolved from a common ancestor around 65 million years ago, you can see here at the bottom. And then they split into kind of three big groups. So the prosimians, the monkeys, and the apes. And the last common ancestor between the apes and the monkeys was about 25 million years ago. And the last common ancestor between humans and chimpanzees and bonobos was about 8 to 6 million years ago, we think. So we're still kind of guessing on that because we don't have the fossils or the remains from that ancestor, but that's our best guess for now. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about these different groups. So there we go. So the range actually has to do with the type of monkey or primate that we're talking about. So you might remember before we did range maps with the with the animal tracking lesson. And so this map shows something interesting. You can see the orange is where the New World monkeys are. So back when the kind of Europe-centric scientific mainstream, so let me say that in a better way. In the times when a lot of the scientists lived in Europe and they thought Europe was like this, for them, Europe was the center of the world basically. And maybe they hadn't even discovered or they didn't widely know about what they call the New World or the United States and Canada and Mexico and things like that yet. So they called their area the Old World. And when they discovered America and things, that became the New World. So monkeys that are from the Americas, mostly Central and South America, are New World monkeys. And then monkeys from the other side of the pond, so monkeys that exist in Africa and in Madagascar and in Asia, those are called Old World monkeys. And along with the Old World monkeys in those areas, we find the prosimians, we find apes, we find tarsiers, and we also find lemurs only on the island of Madagascar. So that's the little yellow blob right there is Madagascar. So prosimians, as I mentioned, they include lemurs, lorises, and tarsiers, and they're a pretty interesting group of animals. If you look, there's a silly looking guy here called the eye, and you might have seen him before because he's got some kind of crazy eyes and really long, sort of creepy fingers. You might recognize this guy, the ring-tailed lemur. Does anybody recognize him from a movie that you might know?
Yeah.
Yeah, he looks like King Julian, right, from Madagascar. So King Julian is actually a ring-tailed lemur. And I think Mort is supposed to be a mouse lemur because he's a little bit shorter and fatter and he doesn't have that cool ringtail like King Julian does. So there's also this funny little guy, the slow loris. There's a little mouse lemur who's just a little teeny guy, and the Indri. And then we see over here a little tarsier. So these are very, very small. Some of these are very, very small primates, and they're pretty specialized. You can see they have really big eyes. Frequently, if they have kind of a big eye towards, or when you compare it to the size of their head, it means they come out a lot at night. So their eyes are big and take in a lot of extra light. And primates in general have a really well-developed sense of vision. So moving on, there's also the New World monkeys that I mentioned. So if you remember, these are found in Central and South America. And we have here a capuchin, a squirrel monkey, and a spider monkey. So these are all monkeys that you might see if you go to places like Belize or down further into South America. If you've ever been lucky enough to travel down there, you might hear these monkeys calling or even see them in the canopy. There's also a lot of Old World monkeys. And they have a great variety of shapes. So if you remember, we talked about how birds have a variety. Well, monkeys and primates actually do as well. So these Old World monkeys, you can see this guy on the left here is a black and white colobus monkey, and he's got a very luxurious long hair coat. This guy with the interesting nose is called a mandrill, and this is a male mandrill, and his skin is actually blue around his nose. We've got a big baboon here, a vervet monkey, which is a very common type of monkey in even urban areas. And then this silly guy. Has anybody seen that silly monkey before?
In nature shows I have.
Yeah, in nature shows. And Aiden knows what that monkey is, don't you, Aiden?
I have a stuffy of one. It's like orange like that. It's a proboscis monkey.
Yes, a proboscis monkey. He's named for his big old snoot, his big silly nose. So I actually got Aiden a stuffed animal of that guy once, and it's pretty silly looking. Yes.
Mommy. Can you go to the last slide that you were on?
Sure, sweetheart.
We saw some of these monkeys when we were in Guatemala,
That's so cool.
and they're really loud.
Yes, they make lots of noises. We're going to hear some of their noises very soon.
Can you go back one more?
Sure.
It's for any. I'm bland and flavorless.
Yes, is that
Mommy
what
knows
Warren
what-
says so he doesn't get eaten? Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, so moving on, I'm going to tell you about another cool section of primates, which are the lesser apes. And you might have heard of the great apes, but the lesser apes are almost all gibbons. So there's some lar gibbons having a little hug here. There's the agile gibbon, is that black guy with the white part of his face. And then the siamang, he's got a big, it almost looks like a bubble under his chin, right? But it's actually skin that gets stretched out, and he's making very, very loud noises. So if you ever see gibbons at the zoo, you might notice they seem kind of curled up, and it's actually because their arms are super, super, super long, and so they tend to sit with them kind of close. So finally, the other kind of ape I want to talk to you guys about are the great apes. And I bet you recognize some of these. We've got a chimpanzee, we've got a gorilla, and we've got an orangutan. And there's actually one other kind of great ape that we might not usually think of. Does anybody have a guess?
Orangutan.
Well, this guy is an orangutan. There's one more. It's people. So actually humans are a type of great ape. So these great apes exist largely in Africa and in Asia. So remember that map I showed you from before, they don't exist in the New World, except for humans. Obviously, we're kind of everywhere now, right? But these great apes are distinguished by a couple of different features, but one of the things I really like to point out is their intelligence. So they're actually very, very smart animals, and they can use tools and solve problems, and they communicate really well. And we're going to talk about some of those things in a little bit. So now I want to focus with you guys on their behavior. I know I mentioned we were going to talk about this today, and there's actually a lot of very interesting behaviors that primates exhibit. We're going to skip human behavior for now because that's not quite so interesting, but we're just going to talk about the primates. So primates have a couple different social systems that they use. So in some social systems called the female transfer system, when they're born, the females move away from that group. They like to move into a new group with different males, and they can really influence the social behavior of those other groups. So that kind of organization usually has very small groups, and it's seen a lot in chimpanzees, where the males in a group are usually related and the females come from somewhere else. And they will also cooperate together. But it's also seen in some New World monkeys, like the spider monkey. So it's important to note that they do this to keep up the genetic diversity. So if you remember, we talked about genetic drift and evolution a little bit earlier, and how populations can change over time. It's actually healthy for them to have a little bit of change. You don't want to be all closely and interrelated. That's really unhealthy, because if you have something bad in your genetic code, then you get lots of copies of it, and then animals aren't as healthy. So in this type of group, the girls move away when they get old enough, and they go join a new family. There's also a system called a male transfer system, and that's where the females remain with their family group, but the males actually, once they get to be like teenagers, they move away. And these groups are usually a lot larger, and the system is really common in certain kinds of primates like capuchin monkeys and also the ring-tailed lemur. So if you think about this, that means that King Julian probably moved into a new family when he was a teenager, which is quite interesting, right? So the males in those groups aren't related, but the females are. So also we have social systems where the species are monogamous, and this just means that they raise their babies with a male and a female that are bonded. And sometimes they'll have obviously a baby with them, but they share the responsibility of taking care of the babies and of defending their territory. So when their babies get old enough, they'll usually leave the parents' area. They kind of move out on their own. And it doesn't mean that they always stay together as that pair forever, but it does mean that they kind of live in smaller pairs and don't live in very large groups. Elizabeth, did you have a question? Okay. Also,
So it's like they only stay with their family?
yep. So they stay usually as a mom and a dad primate, and they raise their babies, and then the babies go off and start their own family. So this is kind of the system that we tend to have as humans. So we don't live in big groups anymore.
Okay.
So there's also solitary species, which this means a male of a species will usually defend his own territory or a home range, but there might be several females that live in it, but they don't really they don't spend a lot of time together. They don't generally protect each other or gather food or share, things like that. So that type of organization is found in the prosimians that I mentioned before. So you can see the slow loris here is one of these solitary species. So the interesting part is that orangutans do not defend their territory, but they're mostly solitary like this. So they kind of just hang out in singles, and they don't like to gather in large groups. So with these different types of social systems, primates have had to evolve ways to communicate, right? Because if you're living with or around others of your species, you have to be able to communicate your needs to them, and you have to be able to communicate other things like warnings, or you might want to tell them that there's food here, or that you see a snake or something like that. So communication is really critical to getting along as a group. And there's a lot of different types of ways that they have communicated. But one of the most interesting ones, I think, is called olfactory communication. And that means you're basically communicating with smells. So lemurs, lorises, tarsiers, all the New World monkeys, they rely on these signals to kind of form their groups and to know about, if there's a new lady monkey in their territory, or there's a big, strong male monkey, they can sniff those things out. And so they actually have a special organ called the vomeronasal organ. And in this picture, you can see it's in a cat. So does anybody have a cat at home? I know Lizzie has one. I know Ava has a dog and a pig. So you might every once in a while see them kind of doing this silly thing with their lips, where they look like they're sniffing, but their lips are up funny. That's because they have an organ under there where they're kind of taking in these interesting scents and the pheromones, and they're processing that, and it gives them so much information. It's almost like they get a signature from these other animals in the area. So they can maybe know if they're healthy, they can know if they're a male or female, and maybe if, there's, I don't know, if they're healthy and ready to breed, things like that. They can detect all of this information using these cool organs that are kind of up under their lips. So watch your pets, because you might see them kind of sniffing things or rubbing things up under their lips, and that's because they're using that interesting organ. In Old World monkeys, they don't really have as big of a vomeronasal organ as the other monkeys do, but scents can still be very important. So one of the most critical ways, yes?
Do we have one?
Ours is kind of shrunken down and doesn't really work at all anymore. So we've actually, like the Old World monkey or Old World primates, have developed more of a visual acuity. So we rely more on our eyes for communication than on sense.
Okay.
So I'm going to show you this cool page on macaques. So remember, I said I used to work with cynomologous macaques, or cynos, and they actually have a lot of different types of expression that you can see on this page. So this is a neutral expression. This monkey is just kind of relaxed. He's kind of saying, okay, whatever. You can see his brows they're not furrowed and they're not up. They're just kind of in a normal position, and he's just looking around, and his mouth is closed. This is just like a normal kind of curious, happy monkey. Sometimes if they're anxious or they're fearful, they'll do things like put their ears back a little bit. They'll open their mouth, and they do this thing called lip smacking. And Aiden and Lizzie know about this because I used to manage a colony of monkeys. And lip smacking is kind of like a submissive but friendly behavior. And so a lot of times when I would come into the room and my monkeys would see me, they would all go, ooh, ooh, because they knew I came in and brought food and treats. And then they do this. And that's kind of like a friendly, submissive, like, hey, how are you doing type thing. So they might stick their tongues out during that, but they don't always. A lot of times it's just, and those can also, let's see, I'm going to show you the lip smacking here. Let me make sure that you guys can hear this correctly. Sorry, I'm going to stop sharing for just a second and make sure I set it up properly so that you can hear everything. Share screen. Share computer sound, that's important. There we go, Google Chrome. Okay, so this is a Sino macaque in its nice big cage, and you see it's got toys and things here, and this is a pretty big monkey. He's gonna do some lip smacking for us. See how he puts his ears back? And he kind of goes, he's actually being very friendly. So it might mean that his caregiver came in and has some treats or something, and he's kind of saying, hey, I like you. I'm a friendly little monkey. But they can also do it when they're being kind of what we call vigilant. So they might be watching something very carefully, but also lip smacking. So they want to make sure you understand that they're not a threat, but they're also going, hey, what are you doing over there? They also have expressions that mean that they want to play. And it's almost looks like yelling, but with little guys like this, it's not very aggressive. So they do pull their top lips down over their teeth, because grimacing or baring your teeth is actually can be a fearful expression. So when they're scared, they might show you a grimace like this guy, and they might squeak. Let's see if we can play this. This is a female, and she's a little bit worried about something. It might not want to load. But so with primates, when they show their teeth, it's usually either aggressive or fearful, because they want to, their teeth can be kind of threatening, right? Because you have like those long canines and things. And so they're showing you that they can kind of protect themselves, and they might be a little bit scared, but they want you to be able to see their teeth. And I'm sorry, that won't play. We'll try to send it to you guys after this. So they can also yawn when they're anxious, because that displays all of their teeth. And they use yawning sometimes to threaten other monkeys. And if you think about it, they're showing them their big, scary teeth and their scary canines, because actually with Sinos, especially, their canine teeth can get so long that they stick out of their mouth. And I've seen some big old male monkeys that are like 15 or 20 years old, and their teeth don't even really fit in their mouth anymore. So they'll go, ha, when you come in, to show you all their big, scary teeth and try to scare you away. So finally, they can put their kind of chin up if they're trying to ignore you, kind of like if your dog does something naughty and they want you to think that they're not in the room, you know, they might go like this and kind of look away after they chew things up. Or they might just kind of stare at you with their mouth open or in a threatening way. So this one is not as aggressive as showing teeth, but it is, you can see this monkey is a little bit upset, and it looks like she's got her baby with her. So that's probably why she's saying back away from me. Okay, so those are the facial expressions I wanted to share with you. But if you note that when you go to the zoo next time, and maybe you see some primates, instead of smiling at them, because we smile when we're happy, right? And we're friendly when we smile. But to primates, that's aggressive, actually, because you're showing your teeth. So if you see primates at the zoo, you might want to do something like this instead. And just be nice and friendly and calm, and try not to make a lot of direct eye contact, because for them, direct eye contact can also be aggressive, especially if it's from an unfamiliar individual. So if they don't know you, they might not like that very much.
Is it like if you're like challenging them?
Yeah, so they might think you're challenging them. So some of you might have seen videos of kids at the zoo pretending to be a gorilla and do this, and that's very challenging behavior for them, and those are not good things to do. They really cause them a lot of stress and anxiety. So if we see animals either in the wild or in captivity like that, we want to try to be kind of calm. We want to look away from them as much as possible, not make eye contact, and maybe do some lip smacking. We don't want to antagonize them because it actually is hard on their bodies when they're stressed like that all the time. So I know that you guys mentioned that you've heard primates making calls, and there are a lot of interesting calls that they do. So remember I showed you the injury before, which is a prosimian. I'm going to play this crazy call for you.
My God.
So as you can see, they can be very, very loud, and they can call in groups. So they're all communicating with each other at that time. And so maybe they're calling from different areas, and it can be very, very loud. But there's a lot of different types of primate vocalizations, as we call them, or noises. So primates also exhibit some interesting behaviors, including hunting. So in this one, oh, sorry, was there a question? Okay. In this one, you can see this. Sure.
Megan, can they hear a monkey calling them from very far?
Yes, a lot of times the noises that they make are at certain frequencies so that they travel for very long distances. And the monkeys will actually go up in the trees so that the sound can travel farther. So they'll communicate with each other for long ranges. And that's part of the reason that they use that vocal communication, because it can kind of go farther than visuals and farther than smells.
And can monkeys hear humans?
Yes, they can. Yeah, they will hear, and they'll also communicate with humans. So there are monkeys that know words and commands. They can learn parts of sign language, and like the primates in my room, I used to play music for them and show them movies and things like that. And I would talk to them all the time. And there were a few that knew when I gave them certain commands that it was either time to come out of their cage and maybe get weighed to make sure that they were healthy, or that I was going to check on them, or that they should come forward to the front of the cage to get a treat. So they actually can hear us and learn commands.
Like dogs,
Yep.
when they learn a trick?
Yep, almost exactly like that.
Tommy, you told me and Lizzie that this monkeys used to really like the Scooby-Doo movies with popcorn.
Yes, I used to pop popcorn for my monkeys so that they could smell it and see it popping in the room. I would bring in a cart with an air popper, and then I would bring in a cart with a TV, and I would play Scooby-Doo and the Loch Ness Monster. That was their favorite movie. So, yeah. So,
Megan,
yes.
if you scream to monkey, well, you are communicating with it sometimes now.
Yeah, you could be, but a lot of times certain screeches and things are distress calls for them. So they might mean, they actually mean different things in kind of their very simple monkey language. So you could be saying gibberish, or you could actually be making them worried because they might think, oh no, there's an eagle, or oh no, there's a snake here. So we have to be careful about how we communicate with them. So as I mentioned, they do have a couple other really cool behaviors that they do, and one of them is hunting. So there actually are some carnivorous primates, and there are some that eat like a lot of different things. They're omnivores like we are. So you see this capuchin monkey here is actually eating a lizard that it caught. But a lot of times they'll forage for things like bird eggs and insects they really like, and a lot of them eat fruit and also kind of grasses and things like that.
I've seen monkeys on like planet Earth eating like bird eggs.
Yep.
Something like that.
Just like us, we like to eat bird eggs too, right? So a lot of the great apes are omnivorous, just like we are. So they'll eat a whole variety of things, kind of whatever they can find. But instead of just hunting, monkeys can also be prey. So as I mentioned before, one of the ways that they communicate with each other are sometimes these very loud noises from the top of trees. And certain monkeys actually have kind of not necessarily a word, but a certain call that means that there's a snake. So if the other monkeys hear this call for snake, they will all go up in the trees to try to get away from the snake on the ground. There's also some eagles and things. You see the harpy eagle here, which is a very big bird, will also hunt for monkeys. And so monkeys might have a call that means there's a bird in the sky, and then they all go to the ground. They're also afraid of things like Komodo dragons, and that's because they can also eat like vervet monkeys and things like that. But their fears of things like this are actually instincts that they're born with. And so like my primates that I had were born in captivity, and they had never really been outside, but they were still afraid of snakes. So if we showed them, yeah.
So they try to hide from them, no?
Yes. Yeah. So they'll try to go somewhere to hide from them if they can. And even, yeah.
What happens if there's a snake and an eagle?
That's a really good question. I think they might be kind of in trouble then. They might have to go sideways. But
Like go to the other trees.
yeah, maybe go to other trees or run away. They are afraid of these things though, even if they've never seen them. So it's what we call instinctual behavior. It's something that they're born with. The primates that I had never really seen a snake or, been somewhere where snakes would be a problem. But if we accidentally played a movie that had a snake, like they really didn't like the Jungle Book. They don't like the hissing noises. They don't like seeing the snakes. They don't like things that look like snakes. So it's a very natural reaction to them. And some of these pressures from predators can also shape, it can shape their alarm calls. It can kind of determine what size groups they live in too, because if you think about it, if they're in really, really big groups, they can all protect each other and all kind of warn each other more easily. Like if you think about meerkats that all have somebody looking out for them and while other people are napping or eating, primates can do that too, especially when there's a lot of danger of predation. So finally, they can also use tools, which is really fascinating to me. In the 1960s, Jane Goodall, the primatologist that I showed you before, she saw a chimpanzee poking grass into a termite mound, and then he would put the grass in his mouth. And she figured out that what he was doing was getting the termites to bite onto the grass inside the mound and then pulling the termites out and snacking on them off of the grass. So there are also other primates that are not great apes that can use tools. This capuchin over here actually is using a rock to break open like a snail or something like that. So there are a lot of different types of tools that they can use in order to get food. And so they might not make those tools, they might find them, but they do spend a fair amount of time looking for the correct tool for the job. The crab-eating macaques that I showed you before that I used to work with, they use stone tools to open things like nuts and oysters and things that they get like sea snails from the water. And that's part of the reason they're called crab-eating macaques. So they'll use rocks and stuff to smash them down so they can get to the good stuff. There are also some kinds of primates that use tools actually as weapons. So they throw rocks and things at each other, which is a little bit scary. But they store they store up these stones, and then they will drop them over the side of canyons and things onto other animals that are not supposed to be in their territory. So it's fairly common for them to use tools that they find. Very, very rarely will they what we call manufacture a tool or make themselves a tool. But it's still pretty interesting that they can do this at all, because it used to be thought that making our own tools was actually what separated humans from the other great apes, but now we're finding that's maybe not the case. So with that, I'm going to kind of finish telling you guys about their behaviors, and we'll just go into some activities.